You shouldn't have come here tonight, Sienna, I said, keeping my voice perfectly quiet and steady against the soft hum of music spilling from my parents' dining hall behind me. Sienna took a slow, trembling step back on the porch, her damp hands gripping the lapels of her coat as she looked past my shoulder toward Freya, who stood inside near the garden window. I didn't come here to cause a scene, Owen. Please, just listen to me, she whispered, desperate, her voice cracking under the weight of a heavy regret she had tried for months to suppress. I just needed to see if you would still look at me the way you used to. I don't look at you at all anymore, I replied, standing firm and immovable between her and the warm light of the hallway. She flinched as if I had struck her across the face, her tear-filled eyes scanning my features for a single flicker of anger, hurt, or lingering bitterness, but finding only an impenetrable wall of calm composure. You made your deliberate choice 6 months ago in that cafe, Sienna. You walked away because you convinced yourself he was your ultimate destination, and now you stand on my family's doorstep asking for a past that no longer exists. But to understand how I ended up standing on that doorway with a velvet ring box in my pocket and a completely different woman by my side, you have to go back to the rainy Sunday evening when my 4-year relationship dissolved over a cold cup of black coffee. For 4 long years, I had given Sienna Vale my complete devotion, my unwavering patience, and my quiet loyalty. As a civil engineer building a career in the city, I had consistently rearranged my work schedule around her unpredictable demands, turned down promising project transfers that would have taken me away from her neighborhood, and waited patiently through every single moment of emotional uncertainty she needed to resolve. I never once made her feel guilty for her hesitation or her emotional distance. I only strove every day to make her feel safe, grounded, and cherished in a world she often found overwhelming. Our friends and families viewed us as an unshakable foundation, the couple that would inevitably walk down the aisle surrounded by relatives who had known us since university. I had even begun quietly browsing real estate listings for residential properties on the eastern side of the city, carefully saving my earnings for a down payment and planning the exact autumn weekend I would ask her father for his blessing. Then came that dreary Sunday at the Cormer Cafe near the central train station, a cozy, wood-paneled establishment we had visited almost every single weekend for 2 solid years. Sienna sat directly across from me in our favorite leather booth, her fingers tightly intertwined around her ceramic mug, deliberately avoiding my gaze for the first 20 minutes of our conversation. When she finally looked up, her expression was unnaturally rigid and practiced, as though she had carefully rehearsed every single syllable in front of her bathroom mirror before meeting me. Ronan came back into the city last Tuesday, Owen, she said, her voice unnaturally flat and completely stripped of warmth or tenderness. He called me, and we met for dinner to talk about everything that went wrong between us 3 years ago. My pulse remained remarkably steady, but a cold, heavy stillness settled deep in my chest as I listened to her next words. He told me he made the biggest mistake of his life by leaving, and I realized I never truly closed that chapter of my heart. I owe it to myself to find out if we can work. Owen, you deserve someone who is completely sure about you. She waited anxiously across the table for me to yell, to slam my fist against the dark mahogany surface, or to beg her to reconsider the 4 years of dedication we had built together. But I simply stared at her, watching the woman I loved effortlessly transform our entire history into an inconvenient stepping stone for her own self-indulgence. I took a slow, measured sip of my lukewarm black coffee, set the cup down precisely in the center of the porcelain saucer, and looked directly into her eyes. I understand, Sienna, I said quietly, without a single trace of anger or hesitation. You are free to go. She blinked in total shock, visibly shaken by how smoothly and effortlessly I accepted her departure, expecting a desperate plea or an emotional breakdown that never came. She hastily gathered her handbag, stood up from the leather booth, and walked out into the pouring rain without looking back a single time. But as I watched her silhouette disappear down the wet pavement toward the station, I was not prepared for the unexpected phone call that would arrive less than 20 minutes later. I sat inside my sedan for 20 full minutes after leaving the cafe, watching the rain heavy against the windshield as the city streetlights blurred into vivid streaks of crimson and gold. My heart was remarkably quiet, not shattered into sharp fragments, but settled and resolved in a way I had never experienced before in my entire life. 4 years of waiting, accommodating, and constantly prioritizing someone else's doubts had come to an abrupt final end. I turned the ignition key, shifted into drive, and navigated through the slick streets toward my parents' home. My parents lived in a peaceful, established neighborhood on the north side of the district, inside a traditional brick residence filled with decades of warm family memories. When I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the comforting aroma of roasted green tea and fresh cedar greeted me, instantly contrasting with the freezing isolation of the rain outside. My mother was sitting in the living room, quietly knitting near the crackling fireplace, while my father reviewed engineering journals at his study desk. They both looked up as I entered, immediately noticing the calm finality in my posture. Sienna and I are completely finished, Mom, I stated directly, removing my damp coat and hanging it neatly on the wooden coat rack by the entryway. My mother set her knitting needles down on the side table, her eyes widening with a mixture of quiet concern and maternal intuition. She didn't demand dramatic details, nor did she probe into the pain she assumed was consuming me. She simply rose from her armchair, walked over to me, and placed a warm, gentle hand on my forearm, searching my face with deep care. You gave that girl everything a noble, dedicated man could possibly offer, Owen, my mother whispered softly, her voice carrying absolute conviction and deep understanding. If she could not recognize the immense value of your steady heart, then she was never meant to share your future. I nodded slowly, acknowledging the profound truth behind her words. For several months, my mother had subtly mentioned the daughter of a respected family friend, a woman named Freya Solis, whom our family regarded with immense esteem. My parents had never forced the suggestion upon me. They had merely mentioned her name across casual family dinners, describing her as a grounded, highly accomplished architectural illustrator who carried herself with quiet grace and independence. I had always brushed those gentle suggestions aside out of strict loyalty to Sienna, repeatedly telling my mother that I was fully committed to building a future with the woman I was already seeing. But that night, standing in the warm hallway of my childhood home, the path ahead became undeniably clear. Mom, that meeting you mentioned with Freya Solis, I said, looking my mother straight in the eyes with absolute clarity. If her family is still open to an introduction, I would like to say yes. My mother paused for a brief, breathless moment, surprised by the suddenness of my declaration, before a soft, deeply reassured smile spread across her face. She squeezed my hand tightly and nodded, recognizing that I was not acting out of spite or anger, but out of a profound readiness to stop waiting and start living. My mother immediately picked up the brass landline phone in the hallway to contact Freya's mother, setting the formal family arrangement in motion for Wednesday evening. But as I headed up the carpeted stairs to my old bedroom, my mobile phone vibrated violently in my pocket with a notification that made my hand freeze against the wooden banister. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. The notification was merely an automated calendar reminder I had set months ago for Sienna's upcoming birthday, a stark, lingering remnant of a life I was actively dismantling. I deleted the event without a second thought, powered off my phone screen, and slept more peacefully than I had in years. Over the next 2 days, I completely immersed myself in my civil engineering duties, finalizing complex structural load blueprints for a major civic bridge project downtown, and keeping my mind firmly anchored to the present. By Wednesday evening, the heavy rain had entirely cleared, leaving the evening air crisp, fresh, and illuminated by a vibrant golden sunset. I arrived at my parents' residence 30 minutes early, wearing a dark tailored suit jacket over a crisp white-collared shirt, feeling completely composed and mentally balanced. I had spent the afternoon mentally preparing myself for a formal, somewhat stiff evening of polite conversation and structured pleasantries between two families arranging a potential match. At 7 o'clock sharp, a modest silver sedan pulled into the paved driveway, and Freya Solis stepped out alongside her mother. The exact moment she crossed the threshold of the front door, every preconceived notion I had constructed completely evaporated. Freya was 27 years old, possessing long, straight, dark hair cascading elegantly over her shoulders, intelligent dark eyes, and a posture that radiated effortless self-assurance. She wore a high-necked navy blouse paired with a tailored long skirt, modest, elegant, and completely devoid of pretense. Our parents greeted one another with genuine warmth, exchanging familiar hugs and walking toward the formal dining room where fresh tea and homemade baked pastries were beautifully laid out. Freya and I were introduced in the main hallway, exchanging a simple, respectful handshake. Her hand was warm, her grip firm and confident, and when her dark eyes met mine, there was no awkward curiosity or hidden pity. She simply observed me with a clear, direct presence that instantly put me at absolute ease. As the dinner progressed, the conversation shifted naturally away from formal family history and into our respective professional careers and personal artistic visions. I learned that Freya worked as an independent architectural illustrator, producing intricate hand-drawn renderings for major urban preservation projects across the state. She spoke about her craft not to impress anyone in the room, but with a quiet, authentic passion for historical structure and design that captured my deep respect. When our parents intentionally excused themselves to the kitchen under the guise of preparing fresh herbal tea, leaving the two of us alone at the long dining table, the silence between us felt remarkably comfortable. You look like a man who recently laid down an unbearable burden, Owen, Freya said softly, her dark eyes observing me with gentle candor and keen perception. I looked across at her, surprised by her immediate insight, before letting out a quiet, genuine laugh. Is it really that obvious? I asked, leaning slightly forward against the wooden table. She smiled, a warm, radiant smile that reached her eyes, and leaned forward too. Only to someone who knows what it feels like to carry one, she replied softly. But before I could ask her to elaborate on her own past, my phone vibrated silently against my leg inside my jacket pocket. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I ignored the vibration completely, choosing instead to remain fully present in the engaging conversation unfolding across the table. We continued speaking for 3 continuous hours, far past the duration anyone had anticipated for an initial formal arrangement. We debated urban design flaws in the city's waterfront district, laughed over shared university memories, and discussed what it truly meant to build a relationship founded on mutual respect rather than constant emotional negotiation. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. When Freya and her mother finally prepared to depart at 10 o'clock, I walked them out to their car, holding the passenger door open for Freya as she stepped inside. Thank you for an extraordinary evening, Owen, she said through the open window, her voice smooth, sincere, and warm. I would really love to see your bridge blueprints sometime soon. I would be deeply honored to show them to you, I replied, feeling a genuine lightness in my chest as her car pulled away. As I drove back to my own apartment that night, I finally checked the missed message on my phone. It was from my close university friend Declan Marsh, asking if I was free to grab lunch the following afternoon. I called him back immediately on speakerphone while navigating the highway. How did the arranged family tea go, man? Declan asked, straight to the point, fully aware of the sudden breakup with Sienna 3 days prior. It wasn't what I expected at all, Declan, I answered truthfully, a genuine smile forming in the quiet darkness of the vehicle. Freya is remarkable. She doesn't play mind games, she doesn't demand constant emotional validation, and she actually listens when you speak. Declan let out a low whistle over the line. Well, brother, while you were drinking tea, word got out that Sienna already moved her things into Ronan's penthouse downtown yesterday. Hearing Sienna's name didn't send a sharp pang of jealousy through my heart like I thought it might. Instead, it felt like reading a brief news article about a stranger living in a distant city. She moved in with him after 3 days? I asked calmly. Yeah, Declan replied with a heavy sigh. She's telling everyone they're making up for lost time. But knowing Ronan, that honeymoon phase has a very strict expiration date. I thanked Declan for the information, ended the call, and parked my car in the underground garage of my apartment building. I walked up to my quiet residence, feeling entirely unbothered by Sienna's rushed timeline with her ex-boyfriend. She was desperately chasing nostalgia, trying to force a spark from dead ashes, while I was standing on solid, unyielding ground. I opened my sketchbook on the desk and began drafting ideas for a new personal design. Over the next 2 weeks, Freya and I exchanged text messages every single day, not out of obligation or habit, but out of a growing, effortless curiosity about each other's lives. Until one Thursday evening, Sienna accidentally crossed paths with someone who revealed a detail she was never meant to hear. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. While my connection with Freya deepened naturally with every shared conversation, Sienna Vale was discovering the harsh reality of returning to a past she had heavily romanticized. The first 3 weeks of her reunion with Ronan Vale had been filled with extravagant dinners at rooftop lounges, late-night cocktail parties, and grand public declarations of passion. Ronan was a master of grand gestures when an audience was present, charming Sienna's friends and convincing her that she had made a courageous choice. However, by the 5th week of cohabitation, the shiny veneer began to crack under the weight of daily reality. Ronan was fundamentally incapable of emotional consistency or personal discipline. He would cancel dinner plans with 15 minutes notice, citing sudden work obligations, disappear for entire evenings without answering his phone calls, and dismiss Sienna's valid concerns with a polished, patronizing laugh whenever she asked for basic clarity regarding their long-term future. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Sienna found herself adopting an old, exhausting habit she thought she had left behind forever, constantly defending his unreliability to her family and making excuses for his absences at social gatherings. Sitting alone in Ronan's immaculate but sterile living room on a rainy Tuesday evening while he was out with clients, Sienna felt a familiar knot of deep anxiety forming in her stomach. It was the exact knot that had never once existed during her 4 years with me. With me, she had never spent a single night wondering where I was after 8 o'clock. She had never questioned whether I would show up to pick her up from the train station in the pouring rain, or whether I would listen attentively when she spoke about her stresses at work. My reliability had been like oxygen to her, so constant, so effortless, and so background that she had mistaken it for something common and easily replaced. That same Tuesday evening, I was sitting at a quiet corner table inside an artisan coffeehouse near the River District, reviewing structural load calculations on my tablet. The heavy timber door clicked open, spilling cold autumn air inside, and Freya walked in wearing a dark charcoal wool coat, shaking water droplets from her black umbrella. She spotted me instantly, her face lighting up with that genuine, unforced warmth that had quickly become my favorite sight. She sat down across from me, pulling out her leather-bound sketchbook filled with detailed architectural renderings of historic city facades. For 2 quiet hours, we worked side by side in comfortable harmony, occasionally sliding our sketchbooks across the table to show each other a complex line or a structural detail. There was no pressure to entertain, no need to manage her shifting moods, and no underlying fear of sudden detachment. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. As we packed up our bags to leave the cafe, Freya looked at me with a soft, thoughtful expression and reached out, gently adjusting the collar of my jacket. "I told my parents I want to host dinner for you at my studio next week, Owen," she whispered softly. But as we walked out into the street together, a familiar vehicle pulled up at the red traffic light directly across from us. Inside that vehicle, sitting at the traffic light, was Sienna, returning home from an errand while Ronan remained out with colleagues. Through the rain-streaked window of her car, her eyes locked onto the sidewalk, freezing instantly in her seat. She saw me standing beneath the amber street lamp, holding a large black umbrella over Freya's head as we walked toward my car. She watched as Freya laughed at something I said, leaning slightly into my shoulder with an easy, unforced intimacy. Sienna stared at the scene in absolute disbelief, her knuckles turning white around the steering wheel as the traffic light turned green behind her. She had assumed, in her self-absorbed conviction, that I was sitting alone in my apartment, nursing my wounded pride and quietly hoping she would call. The sight of me standing beside an extraordinary, elegant woman, smiling with a warmth I had stopped showing Sienna months before, sent a shockwave through her chest. She didn't move her car when the drivers behind her honked their horns, her gaze glued to the rearview mirror until my vehicle turned the corner and vanished into the evening traffic. That night, Sienna couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in Ronan's king-sized bed while he slept soundly beside her, her mind racing with questions she had no right to ask. Who was that dark-haired woman? How long had I known her? The following Saturday morning, fate intervened again at an open-air farmer's market near the city harbor. I had met Freya there to pick up fresh ingredients for the dinner she was preparing at her studio. The morning air was crisp and bright, the market bustling with local vendors selling fresh flowers, artisan breads, and roasted coffee beans. We walked slowly through the aisles, carrying woven baskets and enjoying the weekend sunshine. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya stopped at a flower stall, selecting a bundle of dark eucalyptus and white lilies with practiced artistic care. As I reached into my pocket to pay the vendor, a voice behind us shattered the peaceful atmosphere of the market. "Owen?" The voice was hesitant, sharp, and laden with an undercurrent of panic. I turned around calmly to find Sienna standing 10 feet away, holding a bag of produce, her eyes wide with shock. Sienna looked between me and Freya, her eyes lingering on the way Freya stood comfortably beside me, holding the flowers I had just bought for her. "Sienna!" I greeted her politely, keeping my voice perfectly level and my posture relaxed. "Good morning." She took 2 steps closer, ignoring Freya entirely, her expression a mix of hurt and intense scrutiny. "I didn't expect to see you here, especially not with company." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya didn't step back or react with insecurity. She simply stood beside me with quiet grace, extending her hand toward Sienna with a polite, measured smile. "Hello, I'm Freya Solis," she introduced herself calmly. And the moment Sienna heard the name Solis, her face drained of all color as she realized exactly who was standing before her. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Sienna recognized the name immediately. Her mother had mentioned the Solis family months ago as respected figures in the city's architectural and engineering circles. The realization that my parents had introduced me to someone from such a grounded, accomplished background hit Sienna like a physical blow. She barely managed a weak handshake, her voice barely a whisper as she stammered, "Nice to meet you. I'm Sienna." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I didn't offer any unnecessary explanations, nor did I introduce Sienna as my ex-girlfriend. I simply said, "We have a dinner to prepare for, Sienna. Have a good weekend." I gently placed my hand on the small of Freya's back, turning away with her as we continued walking down the market aisle toward the artisan bakeries. Sienna stood frozen amongst the crowd of shoppers, watching us walk away without a single backward glance. That encounter marked the beginning of the end for Sienna's fragile fairy tale with Ronan Vale. Over the next 2 weeks, the contrast between the life she had abandoned and the illusion she was currently living became unbearable. On day 62 of their reunion, Ronan announced casually over breakfast that he was taking a 4-day solo trip to a coastal resort town to recharge his creative energy. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. When Sienna asked if she could join him, offering to take time off work, Ronan scoffed softly and shook his head. "Sienna, we're adults. We don't need to be attached at the hip constantly. You're getting needy, just like you used to be 3 years ago." The words stung with cruel precision, laying bare the truth she had tried so hard to deny. He had not changed at all. He had simply used her nostalgia to validate his own ego. On day 63, while Ronan was packing his leather luggage in the bedroom, a fierce argument erupted in the hallway. Sienna finally confronted him about his emotional absence, his broken promises, and the cold distance that filled their apartment. Ronan stopped packing, looked at her with cool indifference, and said, "I never promised you a ring, Sienna. You walked away from a safe guy to come back to me. That was your choice, not mine." He grabbed his bags, slammed the front door behind him, and left her standing alone in the quiet apartment. Sienna sank onto the hardwood floor, burying her face in her hands as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. The reality of her miscalculation washed over her with devastating force. She had traded 4 years of unshakable loyalty, devotion, and real respect for 63 days of hollow charm and casual dismissal. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She dragged herself up from the floor, walked over to the kitchen counter, and picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She opened her messaging app, scrolled down past Ronan's unread texts, and tapped on my name for the first time in over 2 months. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Sienna stared at my contact information on her screen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she remembered the quiet, unwavering safety she had thrown away. She opened a popular social media app, searching through mutual university acquaintances' profiles until she found a recent post from an annual civil engineering gala held downtown. The thumbnail showed a gallery of photos from the main ballroom. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She swiped through the images until her thumb froze on the fourth photograph. There I was, standing in the center of the frame in a tailored tuxedo, looking extraordinarily handsome, composed, and happy. Standing beside me was Freya, wearing an exquisite emerald green structured gown, her dark hair styled elegantly over one shoulder as her hand rested comfortably on my forearm. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. What shattered Sienna's composure was not just the formal attire or the high society setting. It was my eyes in the photograph. I was looking down at Freya while she spoke to a guest, my face wearing a look of profound, unconditional admiration and peace. A look Sienna realized, with sickening clarity, I had never given her during our 4 years together. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. With Sienna, my expression had always contained a subtle thread of vigilance, an unconscious tension born from knowing I was constantly being evaluated and compared against an unseen ghost. But with Freya, I looked completely grounded, entirely whole, and profoundly settled. Sienna gripped her phone tightly, a lump forming in her throat as she realized the catastrophic mistake she had made. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Meanwhile, that very same evening, I was sitting with Freya and Declan at a quiet bistro near the harbor, sharing a bottle of red wine after the success of the gala. Declan was laughing heartily, recounting embarrassing stories from our university engineering lab days, while Freya listened with genuine amusement, her dark eyes sparkling under the dim amber lighting of the restaurant. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. "I've known this guy for 10 years, Freya," Declan said, leaning across the table and pointing a finger at me with honest affection. "I have never seen him this focused, this relaxed, or this genuinely happy. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Freya smiled warmly, looking at me with deep affection as she reached across the small table and took my hand in hers. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. "He does the same for me, Declan," she replied softly, her fingers interlocking securely with mine. But at that exact moment, my phone screen on the table lit up with a text notification from an unlisted number that I recognized instantly. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. The text message on my screen was brief, fragile, and desperate. "Owen, I made a terrible mistake. Please, can we talk for just 10 minutes? I'm at the cafe near the station." Declan caught a glimpse of the preview on the screen and looked up at me, his playful expression instantly solidifying into serious concern. He knew the format of the message without even reading the sender's name. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I looked down at the glowing screen for a long, quiet moment, feeling no surge of adrenaline, no sting of residual anger, and no sudden rush of nostalgic longing. The 4 years I had spent with Sienna felt like a chapter of a book I had read long ago and put back on the shelf. I looked up from the phone and met Freya's gaze across the candlelit table. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya didn't ask who texted me, nor did she look over at the screen with suspicion. She simply observed my reaction with complete trust and calm security, knowing the strength of what we were building together. I picked up the phone, unlocked the screen, and typed a clear, polite response. "I'm glad you're okay, Sienna, but there is nothing left for us to discuss. Take care of yourself." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I pressed send, immediately muted the conversation thread, and placed the phone face down on the table. I picked up my wine glass, smiled at Freya, and resumed our conversation as if nothing had interrupted us. Declan relaxed in his chair, giving me a subtle nod of profound respect for the absolute boundary I had just set. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Across the city, sitting alone in the booth at the corner cafe where she had broken my heart 2 months prior, Sienna watched her phone screen light up with my reply. She read the cold, polite sentences over and over again, her breath hitching in her chest as the finality of my words settled into her soul. "Take care of yourself." The phrase people use when they are shutting a door forever. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Tears spilled over her eyelashes, dripping onto the wooden table, as she realized that her rehearsed pleas and desperate apologies meant nothing to a man who had already moved on. She couldn't accept it. She convinced herself that I was merely acting out of hurt, that I was putting up a defensive wall to protect myself from being broken again. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She wiped her eyes, stood up from the booth, and pressed the call button on my contact, refusing to accept that the man who used to wait for her had finally stopped waiting. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. My phone vibrated against the wooden table as Sienna's call came through. I looked at Freya and Declan, excusing myself politely before standing up and walking toward the quiet foyer near the front entrance of the bistro. I answered the call on the third ring, placing the phone to my ear without saying a word. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Owen, please don't hang up." Sienna's voice rushed through the receiver, panicked, trembling, and raw with emotion. "I know I hurt you. I know I blew up everything we built, but Ronan is gone. He was a lie, Owen. I realized the moment I walked away from you that I made the biggest mistake of my life." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I stood near the glass door of the bistro, watching the city rain glisten under the street lamps outside, my tone quiet, steady, and entirely devoid of heat. Sienna, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You decided that 4 years of loyalty and safety weren't enough, and you walked away to find out if something else was better. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I was confused, Owen. I was scared of settling down, she sobbed over the line, her voice echoing with desperate regret. Please, just meet me for coffee, 1 hour. Give me a chance to explain, to earn back your trust. I don't need an explanation, Sienna, I replied calmly, and my trust is no longer available for you to earn. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She went quiet for a second, her ragged breathing audible over the speaker. Is it because of her? She asked, her voice dipping into a mix of bitterness and despair. The woman from the market? Freya Solis? Did your parents force you into an arranged match just to get back at me? The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I let out a soft, genuine breath of amusement at her assumption. No one forced me into anything, Sienna. I said yes to meeting Freya because I was ready to stop waiting for someone who treated me like an option. Freya didn't replace you. You simply left, and she was the person I was meant to find all along. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Owen, please, she whispered brokenly. I'm sorry, Sienna, I said gently. Goodbye. I ended the call, blocked her number permanently from my device, and walked back to the table where Freya was waiting for me with a warm, welcoming smile. But Sienna was not done. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. 3 weeks passed in complete peace. My civil engineering firm officially awarded me the lead management position on the new downtown Civic Bridge project, securing my career standing for years to come. Simultaneously, Freya's architectural illustrations were selected for a prestigious city heritage exhibition, bringing her work into the spotlight of the region's design elite. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. To celebrate these milestone achievements and to formally announce our upcoming wedding, my parents organized a grand formal gathering at their traditional home on the north side. The house was beautifully decorated with white orchids, warm amber string lights in the garden, and classic jazz music playing softly through the speakers. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Over 50 guests filled the spacious living rooms and dining halls. Family members, lifelong friends, engineering colleagues, and prominent figures from the architectural community. Declan was there in a sleek dark suit, laughing with my father near the fireplace, while my mother beamed with pride as she introduced Freya to our extended relatives. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya looked breathtakingly beautiful in a structured ivory gown with a high lace neckline, her long dark hair falling gracefully down her back. She moved through the room with effortless poise, charming every guest she spoke to and making everyone feel genuinely heard. Whenever our eyes met across the crowded room, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Around 9 o'clock, my father tapped his glass with a silver spoon, bringing the room to a respectful silence. He stood beside my mother near the grand wooden staircase, raising his glass to offer a formal toast to Freya and me. To my son Owen, who built his life on integrity, and to Freya, who brought true light into our family. May your foundation be unbreakable. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. The room burst into warm applause, glasses clinking as guests toasted to our future. I wrapped my arm around Freya's waist, pulling her close as she leaned her head against my shoulder, both of us laughing with genuine happiness. I pulled a small velvet box from my pocket, preparing to show our guests the formal engagement ring we had selected together. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. As the applause began to fade, a sharp, heavy knock echoed against the solid oak front door of the house, chilling the warm atmosphere near the foyer as the butler moved forward to open it. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. The front door swung open, revealing the cold rain pouring outside and the solitary figure standing on the stone porch. It was Sienna Vale. She stood drenched from the storm, wearing a dark coat, her wavy auburn hair clinging wetly to her face, her eyes red-rimmed and frantic as she stared into the glowing hallway. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She had heard about the engagement gathering through a casual acquaintance who had seen the public event invitation. Driven by an unbearable mix of grief, obsession, and refusal to let go, she had driven across the city in the pouring rain, walking up to the door she had once been welcomed through as a future daughter-in-law. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. The music seemed to fade into the background as guests nearest the foyer turned to look at the uninvited visitor. My mother froze near the staircase, her expression shifting from warm pride to sharp concern, while Declan immediately stepped forward, placing himself near the entry hall in case he needed to intervene politely. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Sienna stepped inside the foyer, her wet shoes leaving damp footprints on the polished marble floor. Her eyes scanned the elegant gathering, taking in the crystal glassware, the white orchids, the warm laughter she had interrupted, and finally locking onto me standing in the center of the hall. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She saw my arm wrapped securely around Freya's waist. She saw the velvet box in my hand and the exquisite ivory gown Freya wore. The contrast between her cold, drenched reality and the radiant life I was living with. Freya hit Sienna with crushing force. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She took 3 shaky steps forward, her hands trembling inside her coat pockets as she looked directly at me. "Owen," she gasped, her voice trembling so loudly that half the room went completely silent. "Please, I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes, please." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya didn't panic, nor did she pull away from my side. She looked at me with steady, calm, dark eyes, silently trusting me to handle the moment. I squeezed Freya's hand gently, stepped forward toward the foyer, and faced the woman who had thrown away 4 years of my life. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. "You shouldn't have come here tonight, Sienna," I said, keeping my voice quiet, firm, and completely controlled against the soft hum of music background. Sienna took a slow step back on the marble floor, her hands trembling as she looked past my shoulder toward Freya. "I didn't come here to cause a scene, Owen," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her regret. "I just needed to see if you would still look at me the way you used to." "I don't look at you at all anymore," I replied, standing firm between her and the warm light of the hallway. She flinched, as if I had struck her, her eyes scanning my face for a flicker of anger or lingering bitterness, but finding only an impenetrable wall of calm composure. "You made your choice 6 months ago in that cafe, Sienna. You walked away because you thought he was your ultimate destination, and now you stand on my family's doorstep asking for a past that no longer exists." Sienna's tears overflowed, running down her pale cheeks as she looked around the room at my family and friends, all watching her with quiet pity rather than hostility. "I made a mistake, Owen," she sobbed out loud, abandoning all pride. "I thought I wanted excitement, but all I ever wanted was you. Please tell me it's not too late." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Freya stepped gently forward, standing right beside me, her posture regal, warm, and entirely unthreatened. She didn't speak out of anger, she simply stood as my partner, complete and steady. I looked down at Sienna, my voice carrying the absolute weight of finality. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. "It was late the moment you walked out of that cafe, Sienna," I said, looking into her eyes with total clarity. "You needed to find out if Ronan was your future, and I needed to stop waiting for someone who viewed me as a backup plan. We both got exactly what we were looking for." The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Sienna stared at me, the words sinking into her mind like lead weights. She looked at Freya's serene face, then at my mother, then at the ring box in my hand. For the first time in her life, she saw the absolute truth. She had not been replaced or outmaneuvered. She had simply walked away from a treasure, and someone who recognized its true value had stepped up to claim it. Dang. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. A heavy, unbreakable silence filled the foyer. Sienna opened her mouth to say something more, but no words came out. She backed away slowly toward the open front door, her eyes fixed on my face until she stepped out into the dark rain. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I stepped forward and closed the heavy oak door softly, shutting out the sound of the rain and the cold night air. The lock clicked into place with a satisfying, permanent sound. I turned back around to face the foyer, taking a deep breath of the warm, orchid-scented air inside. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Declan gave me a subtle nod of ultimate respect, while my mother smiled through tears of relief. I walked back over to Freya, taking both of her hands in mine. Her dark eyes were shining with trust and unconditional love. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. "I have never been better in my entire life," I answered sincerely. I opened the velvet ring box, pulled out the sparkling diamond ring, and slipped it onto her finger. The room erupted into joyful cheers and applause as I pulled Freya into a deep, loving embrace. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Outside in the dark storm, Sienna walked slowly to her car, her clothes soaked and her spirit broken. She got into the driver's seat, starting the engine as tears blurred her vision. She looked back one last time at the warmly lit windows of my parents' home, watching the silhouettes of people celebrating inside. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. She drove away into the rainy night, knowing with absolute certainty that she would never receive another text, another call, or another look from the man who had loved her for 4 years. She was left alone with the memories of what she had destroyed and the consequences of her own selfishness. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Inside the house, the party continued long into the night. Freya and I stood by the garden window, holding our wine glasses, looking out at the rain falling softly on the roses outside. We spoke about our upcoming wedding, the house we were going to design together, and the family we planned to build. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. I looked at Freya's beautiful profile, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for every turn my life had taken. If Sienna had not walked away that Sunday evening, I would still be waiting in that cafe, compromising my dreams for someone who only half loved me. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity. Her betrayal had not destroyed me. It had set me free to find the real love of my life. I squeezed Freya's hand tightly, feeling her warm fingers squeeze back, and turned toward our future with complete, unshakable peace. The atmosphere felt intensely heavy with unspoken emotion, making every single second feel like an eternity.